Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 29 of the Titanforge Podcast. My name is Dratnos. Joining me, as always, in our festive holiday episode is Trell.
Howdy.
And Tettles.
Howdy.
Hey, howdy. So for today's show, you may have noticed that we're not live if you normally watch us live, or listen. I guess you can't listen to us live very easily, but if you're normally a live consumer of the Titanforge Podcast, this week and next week, we will instead be pre-recorded only. Something we've done in the past for MDI, and this time around we're doing it for holiday reasons. It's difficult to coordinate everybody's schedule, and people are traveling and stuff on those days. So this episode is going to be a normal-ish episode. We're going to talk about the year in review, and we'll talk about predictions for next year. That's going to be our main topic. Next week's show is going to be special. It's going to be a trivia show, Titanforge trivia. It's going to be really cool. It's like a game show that we've got planned out with our friend Squishy.
That was going to be hilarious.
Yeah, we're really excited for that one.
It'll come out on Charles' birthday, the 28th.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, so hope you guys enjoy that. Hope you guys don't mind the not being live part. We will return to being live. Our plan is January 4th will be a live show, but obviously there's some time between now and then, and travel plans may complicate or something. I don't know. We'll see. If that one's not live, it will definitely start being live the week after that.
I'm not going. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'll be back around and have nothing to do around then. So I'm sure. I hope it'll work out. Okay, perfect. Then sounds like definitely 100%. No way anything could possibly interfere with January 4th live show. All right, let's talk about Patreon.com/Titanforge, where we've recently surpassed $500 a month in support. That's really awesome. Yeah, it's going a long way towards helping us make the show every week and making sure that we're able to, pre-record these episodes when we have travel issues and stuff, and get all this content worked out, because there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes here that we've been able to ramp up thanks to you. And
don't lie to them. We would do it regardless.
Well, we would, but all the skip gathering and finding all the stuff in the dungeons.
That was a lot of work.
There's a lot of work there. Yeah,
the dungeon series was a lot, but it was good.
And we'll talk more about that as part of our main topic. But for now, I just want to take this moment, as we're contractually obligated to do, to thank our best patrons: Ahar of US Proudmore, Paul, now also of US Proudmore, King of Skills, VTech, Rock, Zuko, Azza, who would like to be known as Grizz Best Boomy NA, Ja, Adestria, who says Uncle Please Invite, Falcao, who says Khalifa D is in, Drunk Swede from Legion of Lemmings, Argent Dawn EU, Dratnos' Dino Pillow, Ashley Tootsie, Heltari, Demon Hunt XD, and Ishio. We may have to rework what our patron scheme is for next year. I could foresee this being like a 7-minute segment and not too long.
Okay. So you guys want to know something? I had this conversation with Dratnos at breakfast during BlizzCon, and he said, and I quote, "There's no amount of patrons that hit that goal that I will not read out." So,
well,
I don't know.
I mean, okay, it's true. It's true. It's like it's a good rate. I'm happy for anybody supporting us that much. I'm happy to read out their names, but I just worry about that segment getting like 10 minutes long or whatever.
If it gets too long, then I will make us a graphic for it. It'll be fun.
Okay, yeah. So patrons, be ready. If you only want to hear your name heard and not on a graphic on screen or whatever, get ready to cancel your Patreon if that ends up happening. But we're still a little bit away from needing to do that.
Dratnos, can you do ASMR of their names at some point?
I absolutely can. Yeah, our April 1st show. Or actually, maybe Trell could do that. That was really good.
Ahar of US Proudmore.
Ooh.
Okay, Tettles.
Ooh.
All right,
freaked out.
Let's move on.
So we do have some news from this week. This is a final balance change coming to Ajar's Eternal Palace. This is almost definitely the last one that we'll see before the new patch, so the last one before Cutting Edge and AOTC go away. This is the Orgazoa is getting health nerfed by an undisclosed amount. That's kind of weird. And Zoetroids and the Naga are also getting a 5% health nerf on that fight too. Queen's Court, 5% health nerf. And Ajara is receiving the Drained Soul debuff is now an 8% maximum health decrease rather than a 10% one. This one's pretty big, actually, because this means you can probably soak an extra stack every time. Or if you soak the same number of stacks, you're going to have an extra, 40,000 health or something, which is pretty substantial. That's often the amount you're overkilled by on the Ajara fight. So a pretty big nerf to Ajara. Honestly, the thing that's most surprising to me on these nerfs is no Zakul changes. because Zakul and Najara have been creeping close to each other in terms of difficulty on rekills for a lot of guilds and on first kills even. They're starting to approach similar pull counts, so I'm surprised to not see Zakul taking a hit here.
I constantly hear my friends complain about new encounters with Zakul stuff because of new DPS rates and encountering things at different times. You have to hold DPS in the first phase still, right?
Not so. The new strat for Zakul is basically to just blast damage as much as you can, and if you run into some bad overlap, then you do something weird. But just like it's just so painful to hold DPS these days. You're holding DPS for so long if you're trying to do the progression strat. So
I think that's the issue, though, is that there's this dichotomy of guilds that can hold DPS and that there's guilds that can't hold DPS because the fight has global fight timers.
Right.
So once you are getting towards those breakpoints, you're having to reprogress every single week in terms of what when stuff is going to line up, when you're going to get punctures, when you're going to do you actually have to have people that go down to the delirium realm, stuff like that.
Yeah, it means it's hard as a progression guild to make meaningful progress anytime that people start dying, because then you miss DPS checks and your timings are off, and so you're not actually progressing the real fight that you're going to kill from there. So I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about these. I mean, I think it's good in general, but I would have liked to see Zakul nerfed if they nerfed anything. I think that was the highest priority boss to nerf. Orgazoa and Queen's Court, fine by me for those to get a little bit of a hit. Queen's Court, actually a fight I really liked, but it makes it a little bit less punishing if you have a suboptimal comp for it.
My guild currently has 12 melee, I think.
12.
Wait.
Like almost all rogues, even Twitch Prime.
You guys have 12 melee?
Something like that, yeah. We have not pulled Queen's Court. We kill Orgazoa. Last week we one shot every boss, including Orgazoa, and we hearthed out afterwards. We're still not trying Queen's Court. Like the comp is so bad for it.
I mean, yeah, I just don't know how you'd be able to stack up on the boss. Anyways,
yeah, the standalone decree is basically just AFK, and it turns out that
missed the damage check.
Yeah, I mean, even a 5% reduction in health is not going to be enough for us on that. Okay, so this week's main topic, we are going to talk about. We're going to do kind of a review of the past year in both the game, but also just what our show has done in the past year and what we like and don't like about the episodes we've released so far. And then we are going to do a prediction, like what we expect will come next year, how we think that people are going to remember this expansion and this time in WoW's history, and also what we would like to see coming in next patch, next expansion, and just going forward in general. So let's start off by talking about our series in review, our Titanforge podcast. We've done a bunch of different kinds of shows, but the most recent series that we spent the last 4 weeks doing was we spent an episode on Mythic Plus bosses. That's episode 25. 26 and 27 were about trash in half the dungeons each, and 28 was about all the skips we knew about. Although even then there were some that we missed. So of course there's just so many. But we got, I think, a large percentage of all the skips in M+ and explained how they all worked. Tettles, how do you feel about this type of those types of shows?
I mean, personally, I felt like it was a bit better direction. So previously, I don't know if you guys have been watching the show for a long time, but people who have been watching it for a while would know that we did like Siege of Borealis and Atal'Dazar focused episodes, and those were focused on specifically those dungeons. We felt like we got out in the weeds on those a lot, especially whenever we had to talk about beguiling or if it ever changed with reaping and stuff like that. It could get a bit daunting, especially since there's like so many different strategies for like MDI strategies, pug strategies, whatever else. So we decided that we wanted to change up the formatting of those shows, and I feel like the formatting for this hit a little bit better in terms of like separating it out into bosses and then trash and then like skips. And then realistically, we probably could have separated like it into maybe like common mistakes or like ways to improve. But I think we had that, and then how to get into keys and like how to get into 15s, like the show before. So I felt like it all kind of built on one another in a more progressive way, as opposed to here is all the information about this dungeon that you ever need to know. And I felt like we hit it. I felt like we hit a good mark on that.
Yeah, the dungeon by dungeon way of doing it was originally the way I was thinking about doing it, but in retrospect, like those were really popular with a small set of our listeners, but for a lot of them, it's just a daunting prospect. And I think we still landed a little bit too far on the like spending 2 hours talking about intricacies of stuff side of things.
You think?
Yeah, the bosses episode.
Yeah,
well, I think we just had too many bosses in that episode.
I think
right?
we can go. Going forward, we can break down into even. We can rather than trying to be super comprehensive again, we can keep trying to narrow down and go deeper and narrower on a couple of targets. Or also talking about concepts rather than just specific how to do one thing, and talk about how to do one thing and also the concepts that are related there and other places you can apply that.
Sure, it's the philosophy of you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, kind of thing, right? You
Is that the philosophy?
No, that's not the one. It's about teaching a man to fish. Never mind.
Yeah, that's a little more appropriate.
Yeah, no, I see
Never
it.
mind, I'm an idiot. Hold on, I'm so fucking stupid.
Either way, I really like those episodes a lot. I think we got to go to a lot of territory where, like, I'd say about half the population probably knows the tip or trick that we're talking about, and then the other half would just learn on the spot, and then the other half wouldn't know the next one. So we covered like lots of little details about things that probably informed quite a few people of how things work, and that's what I like to do about dungeons.
Do you think we're too in depth though? Sometimes, like, do you think we go over people's heads?
Maybe sometimes. It's hard to say where that line is because it's like, how do you define those people's heads? Like,
Yeah,
where does that cut off? You know?
I think we do a fine job of like having any given 5 minutes of our show be intelligible by anybody and be comprehensible by anybody. My main problem is just sometimes we do these shows that are 90 plus minutes of, you know, slogging through mechanics and explanations of how to work things, and I'd kind of rather spread that out across more episodes. Rather than, because I think it can be hard after you spent an hour listening to those things to stay engaged and listening.
That's true.
So that's
there's a lot of information,
and that we kind of moved in that direction as we moved away from the dungeon shows, because the dungeon shows were really like that. Those were really, 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 you know, thick and dense and hard to stay interested in.
Yeah, because we would end the dungeon shows, and I feel like we were pretty comprehensive with how the stuff went, but I would almost feel tired, like, after them, just be like, I feel like I said a lot, but I don't feel like I got the point across for how to be able to deal with the stuff.
Yeah, I'd rather spend more time on, like, spend some time on a few things and then talking about, like, the theories behind them and picking on some smaller subjects that we can then not need to, like, if we have a really big subject, we kind of have to just train through it, and we can't really spend any time to stop and smell the roses, as it were. And keep the content interesting.
One thing I noticed too is, like, a lot of times we'll be explaining something really intricate and difficult, and I'll be like, you know, to someone just coming into the game or just starting Mythic Plus, they would probably think, why would they even find this necessary? Why would they do that? And then I'd be like, yeah, we should probably talk about, like, the reason you skip the pack in front of full call is because it's actually ridiculous. You know, you don't actually want to fight that pack. But I think we should mention maybe things like that more often.
Yeah, and I think we could also do a better job of being like, okay, this starts to become necessary at this keystone level. This starts to become necessary at this keystone level. Yeah. Like, here's how we'd handle this in these keys, and here's how we'd handle it in these keys. Mm-hmm. Those sorts of tips, I think, because we often kind of just have an implied, like, in high keys, in 23 plus keys mentality that I think it would be good if we could also, like, help people differentiate between doing, you know, a 16 and a 19, right? And, like, what do you have to do differently in those dungeons? So
yeah, I think it's rough because raid is raid. Like, basically Mythic raid is always going to be Mythic raid, but it's rough to be able to differentiate player, like, how you're pulling a dungeon is just so vastly different. The strategies for how you do a raid encounter are typically the same, but the strategies for how you do it, like, a dungeon, they widely vary.
Mm-hmm. So that is, I think, that's our thoughts on how we've done so far this past year. We're obviously very receptive to feedback. If you're interested in our Discord, which should be linked in the descriptions of this video and everything, or the iTunes description, we'd love to hear what you thought about how the show went so far. If you have any ideas for, like, topics, ways for us to frame this, if you'd like us to go more or less in depth, all those sorts of things, we are happy to take those feedback on. Although, of course, you know, at the end we'll come up with a decision, the three of us. Let's move on to, we'll do our tip of the week now, and then we'll move on to talking about looking forward into 2020. So I will start with the tip of the week. This one is resolving a little question we had last week about how to do the Shrine of the Storm evade skip on a Druid's back. Earlier today, in a Shrine of the Storm run that took more than 1 hour, I discovered that you can do that skip on an X-53 touring rocket, so that mount also works. We didn't test too many of the other two-seater mounts, but we could have actually. We had to run that skip like 5 times because we kept wiping on the bridge.
Dude, what?
Yeah, okay, look, we had people, some rusty gamers perhaps returning to the game after having not tanked since, say, Season 1.
Who was it?
Certain historic brewmasters, barons of
I
Black or
see.
Cold, those sorts of people.
Jason.
MDI competitors,
Yeah,
yes.
Previous guest on the Titanforge show.
We learned a lot of things. There was a lot of just learning about what emissaries cause you to do what, and whether or not it's worth it to wait 5 seconds for Ring of Peace to be up to ring the tides out of the pack, or just pull the pack with the tides. With 3 depth bringers in it.
Man.
Yeah, we're like, okay, we'll just root the tides. Ring of Peace is down for a little bit. We'll just root the tides, and then the depth bringers just stand there casting, void bolting everybody. 100-yard range void bolt or something. You can't outrange it. They just killed the whole group. And then we run back. Okay, so then we run back and we ring the tides out, and it's not in combat or whatever. But the other patrol then starts walking next to it, and we're like, oh no, that's gonna pull in Jason's like, no, it's okay, I'll go pair it. So he rolls out and pairs the front mob to stop the patrol, but it's next to the tides, so it keeps walking at him and it, gets in combat, and then we die to 8 mobs. Anyways, it was good. We ended up finishing the dungeon and then having to go back and get count, like 20% count.
Okay, so wait, can you revisit your tip of the week real quick? I think we got it on the weeds.
Yeah, okay, so the tip of the week is that, that druid skip we were talking about last week about a travel form druid, it also works on a touring rocket. That's the X53 touring rocket. If you have that mount, you don't need a druid for it.
Okay.
All right, Trell. what is your tip of the week?
Well, that was the classic Shrine of the Storm pug run, but also in the guild group in that case.
Mm-hmm.
My tip this week is testing strategies on Mythic 0 or normal difficulty is often a good choice. I think it can save someone a lot of time. Like if you see a skip done, say in our last week's episode, and you want to go try it in a key, you probably want to try that on a Mythic 0 first, just so you encounter all the little things that could possibly go wrong. And that's something that MDI players constantly do on Tournament Realm, and other players do to the best of their abilities on live realms.
It's worth noting there are a couple of things that behave differently in Mythic 0 versus Mythic Plus. The big one that jumps out to my mind is Ataldazar, the levers are locked at the bottom of the stairs in Mythic 0 until you kill the boss corresponding to them. But in Mythic Plus, those are unlocked for some reason. So for the longest time, people just assumed that they were locked on M Plus as well, because they are in M0, and that's when they tested it. And then just Andy Brew's group a couple weeks ago started just having a strat that involved a rogue going ahead and opening it at the start of the dungeon, and that works. So that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I didn't know that. And also, you got to keep in mind, things like teaming won't be in Mythic 0. They only appear in the key. Beguiling will only appear in the key. But a lot of things help. If you want to practice knocking the mech jockeys into a Peacekeeper correctly, then that's easily doable in Mythic 0. You can reset it over and over and keep trying it. That stuff's really good to do.
Yeah,
I know that there's one Shroud skip next to a Colossus that some groups use that has really good merit to be able to try in Mythic 0.
Yeah, Shroud Distract skip next. That's one of the skips we did not cover last week's show, but if you do want to go left, there's a Colossus there that with a good distract you can avoid getting in combat with that you should practice in M0.
I must say, probably not hit with a good intent. You don't want to do that skip. You would rather death run that.
It is pretty hard to pull off correctly.
Yeah, I've seen groups do it reliably, but it takes a substantial amount of practice.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's honestly so hard.
Okay. Another thing you can do, by the way, on that front is if you have people with alts in the group, you can see if anybody's alt has a 10 key of that dungeon, and then you can actually test it with Beguiling and stuff active and just go in there as a sandbox run. But that is obviously requires you to have a key, unlike Mythic 0. Okay, Tettles, let's watch your clip of the week. Is there anything you want to do to intro this clip of the week here from Siege of Borealis? Do you want me to just roll it?
You just fucking play it.
All right, this is a good one, by the way. If you're an audio listener, I'll link this clip of the week in the description for you, and you're going to want to watch this. This is some good Moonkin gameplay here. Here we go.
This is why I'm elite.
Over the stairs.
TTV tells the elite druid.
Yeah, flaps. Oh, flaps into the banana, dies to the crushing slam. Look at his little face there. Look at the sheepish little face he's got going here. Here, let's watch this again. Flaps into the banana, stunned and dead, and he just covers his mouth.
It's an appropriate reaction. I did not see that coming. I was like, I wonder what he did this time when I saw the clip appear in Discord, and then I watched it and I was like, okay, he's flapping. He's going to get stuck in something. And then sure enough, banana.
Yeah, flapping banana is the name of that clip. That is a nice one. Okay, let's move on to our main topic. Tettles there looking very happy.
That run was so scuffed, honestly. There were so many things that went wrong with that. So I did that. I think we died like 3 or 4 times to that void pack that was down there at where that void pack is supposed to be at the bottom of the stairs. I'm pretty sure we wiped that pack 3 times. My cat turned off my computer mid-run. So that was a lot of stuff going on in that one dungeon, I must say.
Yeah. Did you guys time it? It looked like you were still on track to time it.
No, we missed it by 15 seconds.
Oh!
Dude, we had how many deaths did we have in that clip?
I didn't see. Certainly one more at the end of the clip than at the start.
Shut up.
Anyways.
There were
16.
16, okay.
With me being DC'd for like 2 minutes because my cat, like, he didn't turn off my computer, but it went like blue screen. It was like shutting down. I was able to hit cancel before it completely turned off.
Smart. Okay, on to our main topic, part 2, looking forward into 2020. We're going to start off by talking about our predictions for the metagame in both M+ and Raid as we go forward. And then we will cover just some kind of qualitative thoughts about the systems in the game and Mythic Plus in general. So let's start off by talking about the tank metagame in Mythic Plus. Trell is our Mythic Plus tank expert. What are your thoughts about specs that are going to gain or lose value next patch?
Oh man, it's so hard to predict what actually is going to be at the end of the season. And like, I think all of us are keeping in mind like what it is actually at the end of the expansion area, where the high skis have finally been done probably that week, and Raid's been wrapped up for a few months.
Yeah, so I think before the pre-patch, right? Like right before the pre-patch, yeah. What are the best keys going to be? Yeah,
I think the best tank in that time frame is probably going to be Prot Warrior eventually. I think they're going to scale the best with physical damage, which is going to be the majority of damage next patch and keys. The tides are going away. Enchanted emissaries are going away. Void, I mean, all 3 emissaries do magic damage. Why can't they just make them do physical damage? You guys ever thought of that?
Or just make the tides autos blockable magic damage even?
Why do they all do pure magic damage? Anyway, Prot Warrior is getting stronger by default because of that change. Brewmaster's getting worse because of the Gift of the Ox change by about 25% less healing probably next patch is what I've discovered so far. In Mythic Plus, I mean. And so with that in mind, I think Prot Warrior at the top and then all other tanks in kind of like a B tier area, but I don't know exactly how they're going to line up until we see them with gear on.
Yeah, I think there's hope for specs like Vengeance and Protection Paladin to be quite good as well.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, the other classes changing value might be good news for Protection Paladin as well. They might enable some comps of the other good specs depending on what changes in the other areas. So definitely not something to be. My guess is also Prot Warrior and then a Gap and then the other 5, but I don't know what order that other 5 are going to be. I think the most confident thing I could say is probably Guardian near the bottom of the other 5.
Really? I don't think Guardian's that bad, man.
I don't think it's bad either. I don't think it's that bad, but I think the other specs, with the exception of Blood, I think are going to have a strong claim on being better.
I mean, Blood is by far worse than Guardian right now, I think.
Yep.
I think it's safe to say, just as like a quick caveat, player skill is far going to supersede like any meta stack rankings. As long as you have like a balanced comp, you're able to play anything in Mythic Plus, honestly, as long as you have a balanced comp.
Especially in the tank department, right? Like tank is a role that right now is pretty well balanced compared to some of the other areas. Like that is less true than tanks. Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
I think also one effect we're gonna have to watch for in these first few months is that Prot Warriors are probably going to gear up fairly slowly this patch because Raid is going to be. It looks like Raid is going to be fairly hostile to Prot Warriors, so. We're going to have to wait until teams are on farm and able to start gearing up Prot Warriors that way, or Prot Warriors that are slowly gearing up and progressing more slowly than the top 100 guilds that are probably not going to play very many Prot Warriors at all.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
In Raid, I think the general predictions are Blood Death Knight is the tank that people are expecting to gain the most in Raid, due to magic damage and being good against that, and there being some good death grip fights. Brewmaster, I think, is still going to be fantastic in Raid. I think our guild is kind of suspecting that we're going to want double Brewmaster or Brewmaster Blood on most fights, with maybe one double Blood fight. And then other candidates for maybe being that Blood Death Knight spot of being really good against the magic damage, or maybe Prot Pallies, or maybe Vengeance Demon Hunters, but Blood Death Knight seems like it's going to be the best overall, according to most predictors. That's the most common guess.
I feel like that's not right though.
Okay.
I feel like you're still just going to play a Brewmaster, and then like you may have another tank. Double Brew is probably still going to be super stupid though.
Yeah, I think Brewmaster, like I continue to expect Brewmasters to be good, but Brewmasters were like 90% of the tanks in the last raid. I think that is likely to drop into 60s or so.
Well, what does Ny'alotha and Carapace of Ny'alotha bring that you would want a Blood Death Knight for?
I haven't looked enough at those two fights in particular.
Okay, so okay. Anyways, the point of that is like basically you're gearing up a tank only to be able to tank the last 2 bosses of an encounter. Very infrequently are you gearing up a tank to be able to tank. The first 10.
That's true.
Like,
that's true.
So you're not going to bring this Blood DK that's going to be good at stuff like Hive Mind and Mout and all this other bullshit that has a bunch of magic damage or like healable damage, whenever there may be a tank that's significantly better for the Carapaces of Ny'alotha and Ny'alotha. I don't know. I think it's
true.
I think it'll be rough to justify bringing a Blood DK, but I do believe that they will be good.
I think it's going to be.
I don't think they'll be world first. I don't
Okay.
think a Blood DK will be in a world first. Well,
I will wager that there will be a Blood Death Knight in the world first N'Zoth kill. I'd place that wager.
Then you're basically banking on Limit to take world first, which is also fine.
Oh yeah, let's get it. NA, USA, this time for sure.
I mean,
Eight-
Method's
Nobody beats
definitely
North
not
America for 8 years in a row.
Man,
Fool me, fool me 7 years. I think another thing to note on the tank meta in Raid is that with Mistweavers and Windwalkers, we'll cover them in a little bit. But I personally don't expect to see very much of them in Raid either. That means one Brewmaster for the Mystic Touch debuff is likely to be your best way to get access to Mystic Touch.
Dude, Windwalker's
Yeah, I think-
fucking trash right now.
In Raid, yeah, it's great everywhere else,
Oh,
but in Raid, it's the kind of spec where if they ever make it good in Raid, given the current way all the other buttons work and scale into AoE, they'll just be so busted in M+ and PvP and stuff.
Dude,
yeah, it's true.
PvP.
All right,
Man.
so let's cover the healing meta a little bit here. This is another interesting one. We'll start off with M+ again, although we'd like to shout out here, there's a great Wowhead article about how class tuning, essences, and corruption are going to change the healer meta. So if you're interested in in-depth look at healers in both M+ and Raid, that's a Wowhead article that we can link as well.
Shit, I'll put them.
I just put it in the show notes. Yeah, I'll put it in the description also. This is great. This is from Automatic Jack and Jada. Automatic Jack, previous guest of the show, by the way. Lots of good information in here. So speaking in M+, one of the biggest, I think, effects that kind of everybody is predicting is that there will be a much closer top tier than there has been for the past year and a half. For the past year and a half, you've been trolling if you haven't been playing Resto Druid, basically. And now it looks like reasonable people are betting on specs that are not Resto Druid next patch. So the main reasons for this are some slight nerfs to Resto Druid are on the way, but also buffs are coming both like situationally based on the circumstances of the affix and the gear and stuff and essences to specs like Holy Pally, and then direct buffs. There are a lot of direct buffs to Mistweaver. So with those effects all combined, people are betting on Resto Druid. Obviously, a lot of people are still betting on Resto Druid. I'm one of them. I still think that Resto Druid is going to be the top healer next patch by a little bit, but I think that Mistweavers and Holy Pallies are also both great guesses here, and if you hate Resto Druid and want to heal, now looks like a patch where you can do that as long as you like Holy Pallies or Mistweavers.
I agree. I think Resto Druid players have been playing Resto Druid for so long, it's going to be hard to swap mindsets to another class or like see its value early on and commit. I could be surprised though. I mean, there could be several Holy Paladins that really show the world what needs to be done, or a couple of Mistweavers even.
A lot of Resto Druids as well don't want to play Resto Druid. Like, they just play Resto Druid because they want to heal in M+, and that they've been trolling if they haven't been for a while. And now they, many of them were Holy Pally or Mistweaver mains in the past and may go back to it now that they can.
Growl wants to really play his Holy Pally a lot.
I mean, Holy Pally is already 3 of the top 10 healers by Raider.io in this season. And there's a lot of good news coming for Holy Pally. Now, to be fair, they're also only 3 of the top 30. Like, those 3 Holy Pallies are really the only 3 succeeding at a high level. But still, they've been putting up impressive results. Top healer NA right now is a Holy Pally. So that there's certainly like that they are very happy about Beguiling going away. Beguiling sucks for Holy Pally, and that being gone is great news for them. It's such a good Resto Druid affix, and they're scaling really nicely with crit. They have Glimmer on all their raid pieces, which means they'll have high eye level, great pieces that are easy to acquire. And just
Glimmer, right?
they're nerfing Glimmer, but not in a way that is big enough to make the playstyle that much worse, especially in M+.
It doesn't change Mythic Plus at all.
It does change Mythic Plus a little bit. So
Okay.
the 8 target cap does mean that they can't have as many offensive glimmers out if they still want defensive glimmers on everybody.
Man, if you're glimmering over 8 targets, what the fuck?
I mean, they do in their cooldowns, especially like next patch
during
with
wings,
with
right?
increased Holy Avenger and wings.
Okay.
In that frame, they can apply like 70 glimmers or whatever. They can blanket the entire anything on their screen can be glimmered.
I mean, how? It was more of like a how often do you have more than 8 targets kind of thing. I feel like that's so infrequent.
It's four enemy
You always
targets
have
and
5.
5 allies, right? And that's 9.
Oh, you can blanket both. Oh fuck.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they if they want 5 defensive glimmers, they can only put out 3 offensive ones now. But it's likely that that's not going to come up too much. And general crit scaling for them, I think, is going to still be a good buff. Vision of Perfection getting buffed is still really good news for them because they're the only healer that really plays that one in keys so far. So
Yeah.
that's great news for them. Bubble looks like it'll be really good as well. Like Bubble is getting better if there's hard lieutenant pulls onto the last boss, for instance, that need a lot of healing in a short time frame.
If people are getting one shot, okay. So basically, there's the scaling of the dungeons is going to go up 45% next patch. There's also already like major issues with how dungeon scaling is working currently with people getting one shot by random shit. So if people are just getting one hit 100 to 0, then Holy Pally's value with their own bubble
And with a damage reduction
increase.
on Devo Aura, it's also really good against one-shotty effects.
Yep, exactly. 20% DR from Devo. Or I totally forgot about this in Legion. Basically, if you play with the Resto Druid, it was so hard for your DPS to live some of the one-shot mechanics, like Dentalian X from Black or Cold. His Shadow Bolt Volley, if you had a Holy Pally, it was so easy to live. If you had a Resto Druid, I literally had to play fucking Titan Guard. It was so hard.
So for those wondering what we mean by scaling going up, we're not actually just talking about like all the numbers going up evenly. That's kind of the thing you'd expect to be, okay, of course the numbers are going up next patch. The thing is that relative to our damage, the damage of the dungeon, relative to our health, the damage of the dungeon is going up faster than our health is. So
Right.
yeah, we are scaling up offensively at about the same speed as we need to keep clearing the dungeons, but our defenses are falling behind, and so we are getting abilities are turning much more one-shotty towards us in high keys.
So just as like a numerical example, the dungeon scaling is going up by 45%. So basically, what is the equivalent of a 10 is going to be the equivalent of like a 14 next patch. You're probably going to gain somewhere around 45% damage once you're max geared. So that'll just put you on par with where you were today. However, your health is probably only going to go up like 20 to 25%.
Right.
Maybe.
So abilities, basically the damage of all abilities in dungeons is going up, and the healths and stuff are staying the same relative to your damage.
It's gonna be wild, dude. Can you imagine if somebody got like one shot by the sabers on Harlan or something like ridiculous?
If those sabers are one shotting you in Harlan, you are dead to the rest of the dungeon. I promise you. They do like 20% of your health or something, right? Like 30 at most.
They do a pretty considerable amount.
Do they? Man, maybe I'm.
They do like 20% of mine, I think.
Okay.
Another tank.
Yeah, then
Maybe like 50.
There's no way if those ever
50.
If those are ever a
they're
one shot,
they're not gonna 100 to 0 you, but
if we're ever at a scaling where those are a one shot, you died on Trothak when the shark hit the ground next to you.
Okay, you're probably right. What do you think? Do you think that somebody's gonna get one shot by some random bullshit?
I mean, yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Not like no, like
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 something
on a banana,
done.
You die.
Yeah,
like,
crushing slam.
You hit the point where scaling is like you just like get hit by something and you just die 100 to 0. You're just like, what the fuck?
I think that
Like-
there are not going to be that many new one shots next patch. I think it's just more that like a combination of 2 hits of stuff is going to be 100 to 0ing you way more than it does right now. Like,
You know what's hilarious to me? The fucking the ads on the last boss of Shrine of the Storm, one hitting your healer 100 to 0 whenever those blow up. That is such bad scaling.
yeah,
that
that's going
is.
to be even more true in this coming patch, right? Is that those will just completely, like, if one of those explodes, your healer is gone unless they're
I
in
didn't
like
even
a
think about
50%
that.
wall.
Okay, so for what I was referencing, Volzith, the last dungeon in Shrine of the Storm, whenever you blow up the ads, it does like a tiny amount of damage to your group. Whenever your healer has the promises of power buff, of course they have 90% reduced health. Whenever you hit like I think it's like a 22 or 23 fortified, they need a DR up if you're going to kill any of the ads. Otherwise, they just die 100 to 0, and you're just like, what the fuck? Mm-hmm. I didn't even, like this didn't start until this season. Like that was not a thing until this season.
Okay, one final note is that we do have some new healer essences coming that may make the more off-meta choices a little bit more playable. I don't expect that this is going to change. Like, I think that we're going to have these 3 specs are going to be the ones that are seriously played in high keys, and then the 2 pre-specs and the shaman specs are going to be the ones that are not as seriously played in high keys. But I think that the less common specs are going to be getting a nice benefit from Spirit of Preservation, a new essence coming that increases people's single target healer on the minor side by quite substantial amount. So specs like Resto Shaman that, I think we'll get a lot of benefit out of this, increasing their healing surge. I think that was a big weak point in the spec. And so running this as a minor, I think will be good news for them and for other specs that just struggle on keeping a tank alive when they're spamming them.
How do you feel about healers for raid? Like realistically, does it look like it's going to be another double disc, double holy pally tier where you just don't want anything else?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know enough about healing in raid to be like 100 to have a really solid bet, but it doesn't look to me like there's a reason to drop discs or holy pallies yet. Yeah.
You want to know something else? How the damage profile for the raid instance on the last like couple of fights is more of the same that we've seen the whole entire expansion. So I don't see there's any reason to drop the damage reduction healers for something that's more throughput even. Yeah, and plus Holy Pally and Disc Priest do insane amounts of DPS if they are allowed to,
and they do passive damage. Like Holy Paladins do damage as part of their healing rotation. The Glimmer build just you want a Crusader Strike to reduce the cooldown on your Holy Shock, and Disc Priest do damage to heal. Whereas like Resto Shaman, I think Resto Shaman is the next most likely healer to be in because there's fights where you want decurses, tremors, Spirit Link. Those are all the types of things that are valuable. Spirit Link in general is just an awesome cooldown.
Yeah.
So,
dude,
but
Resto Shaman has been so bad all expansion. I don't understand.
Resto Shaman can pump on single target, but they are doing no healing. Whereas a Holy Paladin can do a little bit less damage than a Resto Shaman doing full DPS and also be topping the healing meters. So yeah, it's. Yay. I would certainly expect to still see just Paladins and Disc Priests as 90% of the world first healers.
How do you think they fix that moving forward? Do you think it's like a damage profile, like how the fights are designed issue, or do you think it's more of like these 2 healers do the exact same throughput as the rest of the healers, except they also bring this added utility of extra DPS and barrier/diva aura? So
yeah, passive damage and damage reduction either should be given to everybody or removed, or they should be split so that instead of there being 2 specs that have both passive damage and damage reduction and 4 specs that have neither of those, there's instead a spec is either a passive damage spec or a damage reduction spec, right?
I think I agree with that, actually.
Yeah. I think just removing DR as a big part of the game would be, like, just removing DRs from healers except for maybe, like, Diva or Mastery.
It's weird because in expansions past, there would have been more optimizations by, like, hard stacking comps, but just the more expansions in World of Warcraft we get, the more, like, quick people are to stack some random bullshit. Like, I'm surprised that we didn't see like a triple or quad disc setup in Uldir, I'll be honest, because that was by far the best healer then.
Some of the funny stacking things were like when we saw 10 warlocks for
Unat,
Crucible Storms raid.
You're right. That is interesting to know. I think part of it as well is that people you just kind of want more coverage. So like if Warlock is good, you'd rather have a couple of geared up Warlocks rather than like all inning on Warlock and only having geared Warlocks and then basically nobody's sure enough from PTR testing. So the specs they gear up, they just want to have a good coverage and they can move a little bit towards what's good, but they don't unless they really have a good call that they can hard commit to. They'd rather just keep themselves a little bit more open. I think one thing to note as well is that there's currently a bug with Paladin healing that makes it hard to play more than one of them on any fight. If you have 2 Paladins in the raid and both are running Diva Aura, just randomly, sometimes people are going to be unaffected by either and die to one-shots.
Really?
Yeah. If you're interested, let me see if I can find this tweet. There's a tweet from Jeeth on Method explaining this, trying to explain to to the Warcraft devs about how it works. Yeah, it's it's very silly.
The sad state of affairs that you still probably run 2 of them.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about like all the raid bosses, like the in-tier bosses being like 2 or 3 healed?
I was gonna say, like, the 2 raids ago there were 3 healers. Last raid there were 2 healers for the world first kill. Which healer do you think is going to be for the 1 healer on this last raid boss of the expansion?
It's Disc Priest. It's always Disc Priest.
Yeah, I think that the reduction in the amount of healers over the course of the expansion has definitely been notable. I don't expect to see a 1 heal last boss though.
Nah, me either.
I think 2 or 3 are. I think 3 is the most likely number, but 2 maybe. Yeah.
Did you know that Queen Ashara was actually like the throughput required for Queen Ashara is actually 1 healable?
Yeah.
Like you could 1 heal that with the rest of Druid. The throughput is there. The issue is that you want the damage reduction, and it's not. It wouldn't be consistent.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to talking about. So we talked about healer meta and M+ and raid. Let's talk about the. Okay, good.
Is there any like sleeper picks you think that are gonna just like be OP for healers, or do you think it's all just gonna be more the same?
Nah, I continue to expect. I don't expect much from the like, Holy Priest type stuff.
What about Revival?
What about J.Chi?
I mean, that's an M+. Like I think Mistweaver will be high tier in M+. Yeah, the pure buffs they're getting to throughput are substantial, and that'll affect them a lot in M+. Not in raid. In raid, I think they're still just fundamentally missing, damage reductions and passive damage.
Okay. Yeah, sounds about right to me.
Okay, so on to DPS meta in M+. Let's start off by talking about, I guess, the melee range dichotomy. I continue to expect to see mostly 2 melee, 1 ranged groups in next patch. I don't see things going much farther away from that. With Beguiling going away, you could... I don't know. Like it seems to me like you're going to be able to double pull enough that you're going to want to be able to have a lot of melee kicks available to be able to do big pulls. And so I think you're going to want to see a lot of the same specs that you currently do. I think that as far as the melee specs go, I expect there will still be rogues in 90% of the top keys timed or more.
So yeah, I definitely broke this. I broke this in our show notes into like 3 different parts for Mythic Plus. I've broken into first spot, second spot, and third spot. I think we're all 100% all in rogue first spot. So forever and always 100% of the.
For context on this though, like 100% of timed 25 keys this season had a rogue in them. 100%. There was no group that didn't have a rogue. There were many groups that had 2, and some that even had 3 rogues. I expect that next season there will be some groups doing keys at the top level or maybe 1 below without rogues. Because with Awakened, yeah, I think that the penalty for not playing a rogue is going to be a lot lower. I think that rogues are still the best thing you could be doing, but I think it'll move into something like Havoc Demon Hunter. There were 3 times 25s that didn't have a Havoc Demon Hunter, and I expect to see similar numbers of not having rogues next season.
Well, okay, so the issue is that like not inviting a rogue means that, like, dude, how many people on our friends list are rogues right now? And plus, you're not going to lob somebody for 1. Yeah, you're not going to lob somebody for 1 or 2 keys.
But maybe somebody has, maybe towards the later parts of the patch, people have multiple geared characters, and you decide to play a comp without a rogue for 1 dungeon. You want to play other stuff instead. You have Havoc Demon Hunter, Elemental Shaman, Fire Mage, or something for a dungeon. I could see those comps working out. Anyways, I expect that there will just be people who, not us necessarily, because we know a lot of rogues, but people who just push keys in the group without a rogue. I think those people are going to have a lot more success next season than they were this previous season. I don't think that it's because this season it's impossible to imagine somebody timing a 25 without a rogue. Next season, it's I think possible to imagine those groups being at least okay-ish. Okay,
but still for our first spot, we got
So to clarify, I'm expecting like 90+% rogues. Yeah, so it could be approaching 100, could even still be 100. But this season it was 100, so I expect to see a slight decrease in the requirement of rogues. I still think rogues are fantastic, though. Yeah. Second slot we expect to also be melee. Again, it could be a rogue. I still think double rogue is going to be fine next season. There's no reason that rogue is bad. There's just reasons it's less necessary. Havoc Demon Hunter I think also still looks fantastic. I expect that the second slot will almost always be a Havoc Demon Hunter as well, or at least like 80+% of the time.
So not Fury Warrior, not Windwalker Monk, not Unholy Death Knight.
So Windwalker is a spec that I think will be competing for this spot. I don't expect Enhancement Shaman, no.
Survival
or Survival Hunter. But my thought on Windwalker, like I think Windwalker will creep up in how much it's taking this spot.
I think so too.
Because Brewmaster going down, so you want Windwalker for the Ring of Peace and for the Mystic, or for the Mystic Touch.
So Windwalker if you want triple melee, Demon Hunter if you want one range, probably.
Yeah, I mean you could just play Windwalker, Havoc, Rogue. Like that comp sounds pretty good to me.
That's actually my picked out comp, except I think Holy Paladin is going to be a lot better, and so a lot better than it is currently, at least. It's already good, but it's going to be pretty close to the rest of Druid. So I think 5 melee characters is rough, and so
you
I
want
say
a Fire Mage or a Boomy in there.
I think that triple melee comp would be really good with the rest of Druid, but if it's Holy Paladin, then probably one range.
Yeah. So that third spot again, that could be a good spot for the Fury Warrior. Although I'm worried about Fury Warrior. If we're double pulling every pull again, and there's 10 mobs in each pull, Fury Warrior is not going to be good. Like that is not a good time to be cleaving onto 5 targets. You're just like it's miserable actually. As like when more than like 6 targets are in, you whirlwind and you apply a damage taken increase to 5 targets, and then your next attacks will just hit a different 5 targets, and you just feel awful about your entire choice of spec.
Yeah.
So for what it's worth, I actually think double ranged is really good in like half the dungeons. So like honestly, you could play double ranged in Temple of Seth Rouse. I would say it's probably a top tier comp in there. It's probably a top tier comp in something like Freehold as well. And then like other dungeons is like, and then there's some dungeons that's just not doable in like Toldagor. If you zone in with double range, you're probably fucking trolling. Like Siege of Borealis is
Shrine as well, pretty sketchy that with long kicks on your group.
Shrine of the Storm, Underrot, Toldagor, probably not a double range dungeon. Siege of Borealis, Temple of Seth Rouse, Freehold, all pretty
it's
good.
tough though because like you can't just only like you would need to have flexibility in your comp then, right? You need somebody who played multiple things, or you need to be playing with different DPS for different keys.
Yep.
Like if you have a comp that works for 8 out of 10 dungeons, that's probably fine. But if you have a comp that works for like 5 out of 10 dungeons, we're in big trouble because you're just going to have all these keys in your group that you can't do after you've done a couple keys and they roll into them. I think Elemental Shaman is a great pick though for like if you want the benefits of double range without the drawbacks. Elemental Shaman, Fire Mage, or whatever is a great way to do that.
How do you feel about Ellie plus Moonkin? Because we actually saw that a decent amount. Not a decent amount. We saw it sometimes in season 2. We saw Petco and Sinky playing together. And I don't remember what tank they were playing with, but they were actually owned.
It's kind of nuts. Like there's so many pulls you can do with just like trees into Earth Ellie into trees. Where like what's going to kill your tank there? What you can pull so big, Solar Beam, Earthquake stops. You know you do a lot of extra. Unique kinds of interaction to pulls with that group, and you still have good kick coverage because your Elemental Shaman is a melee kick. It's better than melee kick.
Having both those classes is a huge damage reduction for tanks. I'd say you'd actually probably take at least half the damage that you would have taken before having all those utility things.
Yeah. You could play you could play like Vengeance Demon Hunter tank so that you get your Chaos Brands even, and you mitigate some of the damage loss of playing a Vengeance Demon Hunter.
Demon Hunter tank, huh?
Dude, yeah, that's how you get your Chaos Brand, okay? And then you haven't given up your Rogue, and then your healer can be a Holy Pal even or something.
And you don't have any melee players besides a Rogue that are going to pull a threat off you, so your threat's solved as well.
And you still have double ranged. You could play double ranged Holy Pally comp that then you still have good range for all the ranged baits and stuff.
I don't know what you're talking about. I always pull threat off of my tank as a Moonkin.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, with trees.
Hold on.
Oh. Love it. Okay, so yeah, I think that's a good survey of what DPS meta looks like. I think Unholy is another spec that is worth talking about too here. Unholy looks to me like if we're going to be double pulling a lot, that is going to be a really nice time to be playing Unholy Death Knights also. They just do big damn. DPS Death Knights can also go Frost for dungeons where Unholy isn't looking too good, and Frost I think is better than expected also. Yeah,
dude, I think Frost is so underplayed, but I actually think it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, just this season as well, it's actually really good for beguiling. Like, you ever just gripped out a Tides and kicked something, or gripped out an Enchanted at the start of the pull and just run into where the pack was?
Anyway, I think more of the point that we're trying to make here is that every DPS is playable if given the correct composition. You're probably going to want. So basically, if you have a balanced DPS comp, you are able to play anything, even if it is like Survival Hunter, Enhancement Shaman, or everything.
Yeah.
else.
So
what I mean by balanced comp is like you need multiple melee kicks and a rogue probably.
So for context, this season I looked at a statistics website, bestkeystone.com, and it tells you what the best compositions are in terms of like success rate and average rate or IO score of runs with this comp for each different composition, and you could filter it by certain specs being in there. For every spec that wasn't Outlaw Rogue or Havoc Demon Hunter, the best DPS comp was that spec, an Outlaw Rogue, and a Havoc Demon Hunter. Every single one. That was the best you could do. So if you want to play Survival Hunter, play an Outlaw Rogue and a Demon Hunter with them. If you want to play an Elemental Shaman, play an Outlaw Rogue and a Demon Hunter with them. That's always something I got on my tier list videos. I get these comments about how you know people are making it work, and it's like, yes, but if your spec only works with an Outlaw Rogue and a Havoc Demon Hunter, you know that's still restrictive. And that's a lot of specs.
That's the case with any of the off meta tanks as well. Like you'll see a Blood DK. Vira is the current #1 Blood DK on the leaderboards. And I watched some of his YouTube videos the other day because I was learning some stuff. He has some great videos, by the way, on YouTube. But he runs with the pure meta comp for this season, right? Outlaw Rogue, Havoc Demon Hunter, and a Boomkin for trees to cover a lot of his shortages of RP and other resources, and then a Wrestle Druid. So he has they are alliance as well. So they have like all the meta stuff except for the Blood DK, who can make it work because of that. Yeah,
and that's a very common thing you'll see with like, you know, the best off meta spec is going to be surrounded by 4 very good players of meta specs, and that, you know, it's a different thing than like there are the full off meta groups that are like there are some groups of these that I've heard about doing like 22s and 23s that are actually like 5 specs that are not very popular. Those are a different thing entirely. Very cool to see people trying. Like I no Rogue 23s or something with Arcane Mage and Vengeance Demon Hunter or something. Someone was telling me about. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we did a 21 Waycrest like a month ago with a Disc Priest, Brewmaster, Sub Rogue, and Arcane Mage, and some other random stuff. It was a good one.
That's a good one.
Love to hear it. Yeah, that's a very different thing than just bringing one spec into the meta comp, because the meta comp, like 4 out of 5 people being meta comp usually covers the weaknesses of one spec. Okay, let's talk about raid DPS meta real quick here. I think they're kind of a couple of points. I think that the top tier melee specs next year are going to be Havoc and Warrior, and then I expect to see, you know, Death Knights and Rogues and also being good, but less in on every kill. I expect there will always be DHs and Warriors in on every fight.
So for world first kills, I expect there to be very few melee except for Demon Hunters. I don't expect there to be very many Rogues at all.
I would expect to see at least one Warrior in each of those groups, maybe 2. Like Execute is so valuable in world first setting as well.
Maybe? I don't know.
You don't think there are many Rogues for soaking?
No, Rogues are not that good next year, I don't think.
I agree. Oh. I think Rogues are, like, I think I wouldn't be surprised if there was 1 or 2 Rogues in some of these comps, but I don't think that of the top 10 world kills, I bet there will be a lot without Rogues.
Those will be an exceptional player thing, not like a this is the best comp thing.
Yeah, Rogue is kind of like, if you happen to, if it's a 4 melee fight and you want to bring a 5th melee, a Rogue is usually a pretty good choice for it as well, because Cloak usually allows them to pretend to be arranged for a while.
So how many melee do you think will be in on like the top couple world kills?
4. Then? 4 is my guess for world first Ny'alotha. Yeah.
2 Demon Hunters, 2 Warriors, you think?
Yeah, 2 DH, 2 Warrior, or 2 maybe 1 Rogue or DK slips in for either of those.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I think basically what Dratnos and I are getting at is this looking pretty ranged heavy again.
Yeah.
Your mages, your moonkins, your spriests, your warlocks are pretty hot.
Shadow Priest nerfs are coming. It's fine. It's a fine time to be a Shadow Priest. The good Shadow Priest fights, you're gonna be the best still on those. So
I actually do worry about early progression as a Shadow Priest. Like the first the first couple of weeks are gonna be fucking rough because you were going to be like trash. Like Heroic Week, you're gonna be bad. The week after Heroic Week, you're still gonna be bad. That third week, once you have gear, you're going to be the fucking best ranged again, and you're just gonna be like, yeah, fucking nerfs, lol.
Yeah, you're gonna just go from like the single target fight into the Shadow Priest fight or whatever, and your raid is gonna have carried you for 7 bosses, and then you're just gonna get on this. You're gonna get to this fight, and you're just gonna do this like Popeye thing where you flex your muscles and they just go. And then you're gonna get to Rodin and the Shadow Priest, the Ellies, the Warlocks, the Moonkins, all the fucking range. You're gonna bring 1 fucking melee to Rodin or something stupid, I bet. Yeah, I mean, this is for the like Hall of Fame progression. You know, obviously after that, all the comps are going to work out in a couple months when we're.
You can play anything. Honestly, God, like
you're going to be fine
if you're an exceptional player. And that's why people always put this on like their WoW prog and stuff like that. We're always recruiting exceptional players. If you're an exceptional player, you'll get brought in regardless. Like even if you're playing fucking.
Unless you are a world
like the tier that Death Knight's bad.
Unless you're a world's top 10 tier, top 10 guild, there's a space in Poetry Club, for instance, for the best X of any spec, basically.
Yo, you guys recruiting Feral Druid? How about Survival Hunter?
Yeah, probably if we could get the world's best Survival Hunter, it would be close. Some of those specs, it would be close whether they would be brought to progression, but for at least 30 of the 36 specs, we would take, if you were the best at a certain spec, we'd be fine with it.
Yeah. If your God's gift to Surf Hunter or God's gift to Feral Druid when we're like world 50th, we would probably bring you to Prague if you were like God's gift to whatever spec. Yeah,
that's the thing though. Is you like we'll take a medium Havoc Demon Hunter and that's fine, Well, actually we won't right now because we have like 7 great Havoc Demon Hunters on the roster, but if you were a medium Shadow Priest, we would accept you. Yeah, if you're
medium well Shadow Priest.
Yeah,
thank you.
Medium rare even. Okay, that's the DPS meta. Anybody have any specs that they wanted to talk about that we didn't cover here so far in DPS?
It's hilarious. We were talking about sleeper shit for 8.2. Coming into the patch, and we said that Fury Warrior was probably going to be sick. I think we were actually right about that.
Yeah, 2 Fury Warriors time 25s, which would have been completely unprecedented when we predicted it. It looks good. Yeah, I think that was a great call by us. Yeah,
I think Windwalker comes back pretty hard.
Yeah, with Brewmaster comps going, also just like the characters that played Brewmaster in Keys this season will play Windwalker in Keys largely next season. I think many of them will.
Trell Brew, oh god, fucking dodging.
Yeah, give me Trell Brew WW. Add a W to the end of your name, and then we've got.
I'll change my name. Let's do it.
Yeah, Trell Brew.
Swift dodge on that one.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about how we expect these systems and the decisions made in this, last year and this coming year to affect the game.
Are cool.
Yeah,
I like these questions.
Yeah. So, first question, I'm gonna throw this one at you, Tettles. Then, how do you think people will view Titan forging and corruption gearing within the next year?
I bet people actually look back fondly on Titan forging.
Me too.
Hysterical. Dude, people have whined about people have whined about Titan forging for so long. I bet people want it back. It's funny because I actually think they're kind of close to a good system where with corruption, like it's funny because it's close, but it's like so bad in some ways and you're just like, what the fuck? Basically, it allows you to change your gearing options. So where if you want to ook out with 80% corruption, you can. You're not going to. That's trash. That's a trash system. You're never going to do that. But if you it gives you the opportunity to if you wanted to. So like corruption is like close, but again, it's the Blizzard historic slightly missed the mark.
I personally think that corruption is going to be so fun to play for me, but I think people are going to hate it. I think people are going to hate dying to corruption effects. I think people are going to hate grouping with somebody who has 80% corruption and just like being like, come on, why? I think people are going to hate the experience of just an item corrupting and like removing the corruption from it and not getting the crit corruption if it was a bad one. Like, I think that there's going to be a lot of negative feelings about it, even though I think it's a pretty cool and interesting system. I also think it does a really good job of nerfing the raid over the course of months because we're just gaining corruption resistance with our cloak upgrading over time. And so that's going to allow us to do more damage by wearing more corruption. I think that's a really elegant solution to making the content easier in a couple months. But I still think people are going to look back fondly at Titan forging. I also think one thing that corruption does very poorly compared to Titan forging is allow J.B to not have to raid to be mythic geared.
They did it with explicit intent.
I use J.B as the example here because he's somebody who just like slams like 20 keys just like 24/7, right? That's what his stream is. He turns on his stream and then he's doing 20 keys for 8 hours and then he's done, or he'll pug 17s or whatever if need be. And previously, that has been sufficient to gear him so that he can then push on push week. And I don't think that that's going to be true anymore. I think he's going to have to step into a raid to be playing on push week with the people who are raid geared.
Yeah, and we've talked about this at length, and we even wrote a Wowhead article about this. We don't believe that should be like the correct step forward for the game, but it's just the way.
Yeah, I think it's important that Mythic Plus only players can do the highest Mythic Plus content without needing to gear from another source, or at least without being like huge. Like of course it's fine to have specific trinkets or whatever be from a different source and be like a couple % behind because you're not doing everything. Like doing everything should get you a little bit of a bump, but people who only want to do Mythic Plus should be able to only do Mythic Plus, and people who only want to raid should be able to only raid. And I don't care about comparing eye levels in town. Somebody who does both or who only raids can be higher than Mythic Plus for that. But what's important is somebody who only Mythic Pluses should be able to do all the Mythic Plus they want and shouldn't feel gated behind doing the other content that they don't have time for or that they don't enjoy in setting up a raiding guild.
So I have a question. How did people feel about Valor whenever it was first introduced?
The people who comment on forums and who talk about the game love it. They think Valor is great. In franchise players love Valor because it's fully deterministic, right? You do your Valor cap every week, and then you can plan out, you can schedule when you're going to buy your items, and you're like, okay, I'm buying these shoulder pieces next week, and then I'll be set mostly, and then a couple weeks after that, I'm going to get this one bracers, and then I'm good. But in practice,
how was it looked at whenever it was like current though?
I think pretty favorably. I think some people didn't like the grind. I think some people didn't like coming back and being 8,000 Valor points behind everybody who'd been playing for 8 weeks when they hadn't. But in general, at least the talking about it from high level people was positive at the time and is positive now, and people remember it fondly. I think that Blizzard removed it because it wasn't exciting, and there's no exciting moment to it. It's just a grind that you did, and you got your piece after a certain number of weeks, and that was all there was to it.
Hey, what about essences?
Yeah, essences are stupid. They're dumb. Essences, are the worst of all worlds.
Skated behind rep, like I don't understand.
I think that returning to some kind of Valor-like system where at least like give me gear or Valor as rewards from stuff, like let me scrap things for Valor, and then I think just making like a global residuum Valor type system. Make my weekly box contain, I think in Shadowlands they might even be doing this, make my weekly box contain like a choice between some items, and if I don't care about it, give me some Valor equivalent, whatever currency they want to call it.
Sure.
That I can just slowly build up. Like instead of slowly building up AP from whatever I do, let me slowly build up Valor from whatever I do and buy cool items with it and get big chunks of it from high level content.
All right. So yeah, I guess circling back, do we think that Titan forging will be viewed favorably?
I think that if it goes away, people will mostly talk about it negatively. I think it was just so complained about for its entire lifetime.
I think it'll be viewed favorably. What do you think, Trell?
I think it'll be viewed favorably a year from now.
Cool. I personally, I've always liked it. I just have, there's been a lot of complaining about it. Yeah, I usually when I talk about liking Titan forging, I get in an argument with somebody. So I assume that's going to mean that it's going to be viewed unfavorably.
This is why we named our podcast after the greatest system of all time.
Oh yeah. We'll see next. I think that a good system could have Titan forging and deterministic loot. Like I think that you Titan forge and you get your piece of loot early, or you get a specific Titan forge piece, and maybe that changes what you're going to choose to buy from the vendor.
What you're gonna buy?
Yeah, you can also then eventually after a month or so buy a max Titan forge piece also, and so you'll get some random pieces, and then you can buy some specific pieces, and I think that would be a really good harmony to hit. Okay, let's talk about seasonal affixes. Now, one thing we know is that currently what they've said about M+ and Shadowlands is that there will be seasonal affixes there. That's a piece of information that we know is currently in the Shadowlands plan. But Tettles, do you think seasonal affixes are good, and would you continue them in Shadowlands?
I personally don't mind the seasonal affixes. I think their approach for how they handled like beguiling and infested, for example, is pretty poor. But like the concept of each patch you get like one global affix on the dungeons, I think in concept that's pretty good. I don't love the execution of them being like always negative, but I feel like they could.
I mean, Awakened is going to be a positive affix, right? Like the fact that it gives you skips through a dungeon, that's upside, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Reaping was kind of also that, because it let us, unholy onto bosses even, and AoE onto bosses like that. That wasn't purely positive, but in some cases it felt good to be Reaping, right? Like it felt nice to fight a Reaping wave at times. Not for you, Tettles. Obviously, you were.
Yeah, I don't know what to talk about. I got fucking lobbed.
Yeah, you
like Prot warriors and shit. Like I got bullied out in the schoolyard and pushed down, and I just wanted my opportunity to play tetherball and to play Foursquare. But sometimes
I remember tetherball. That was a good game.
Anyways.
Yeah. Trell, what about you?
I really like the seasonal affixes idea as well. I just didn't like the weekly rotation. And my biggest gripe about it was how different they made the runs each week. Like every single pack feels like you kind of have to reprogress on it in some way. If it has a tides emissary of the tides inside of it, this season especially, I think it was pretty difficult to just jump into a dungeon.
Yeah, Infested was kind of like this as well, where you had to like relearn the Infested pattern on a similar 3-week rotation, but it was a little bit less pronounced.
Yeah, and on top of that, the Void rotation of the emissaries this season was just horrendous in my opinion. Like usually I'll talk to a group getting to a 15, and they're like, "How do we do this strat that you did, but watered down so we do it in the 15 the first try and it'd be successful?" And I'm like, "Well, there's a Void in this pack, so you're gonna wipe pretty much no matter what, unless you decide to death skip. Still you can't water that down in a 15. It's still really, really challenging.
Yeah, it created a lot of packs of the double honor guard Volcall difficulty.
Yep, that's a very cool pack, by the way.
I think seasonal affixes are a fine idea as well, but they need to stop doing them ones that are
on 3 week.
Even it's just like that isn't my big problem. The two bad affixes, Infested and Beguiling, were the rotational on 3 week type. But I don't even have a problem. Like if Awakened were on the which pillar was mapped to which boss changed on a 3 week cycle, I think that would be fine. Or a 4 week cycle. Like I don't think that would be a huge amount of extra attacks. I think the main problem is that Infested and Beguiling were just like always on, always high thinking about. You have to think about them every pull, and it's the same the whole season. And it's just like, okay, I'm dealing with Tide's emissaries this whole time. It's exhausting. So moving away from that, moving towards Reaping and what I hope Awakened will be like, which is not an exhausting affix, right? Like you are only thinking about Reaping really every 20%, and then it's a pretty light and fun experience to deal with the Reaping wave. Like, yeah, it can be deadly, it can be hectic, but it's not always on. Reaping and Infested, just every single pull you had to think about. So I put other affixes, like some affixes would be really bad as a seasonal affix. Like affixes, like imagine if Bullstring was a seasonal affix, right? Like just playing Bullstring keys all season. That's sort of what Beguiling and Infested are like. Like the same.
It becomes grueling,
right?
It just it feels like you're just trudging through, and you're just like slogging through every single dungeon, and you don't. It feels like once you get at the end of it, you're just like, all right, I'm fucking done. Thank God. And
right.
It's never like, man, that run felt good. It's more like a sense of relief, not like a sense of accomplishment. It's a weird feeling. It's hard to describe.
Seasonal affixes,
That's why people like bursting so much, is because you have to like really focus on it for the bigger pulls that stuff dies evenly, where you suddenly have like 8 stacks, and then usually for a while you have like 3 or 4 stacks at the end of a pull, and that's it. And that's like, okay, that's not too bad to live through. You don't have to pop anything for 3 or 4 stacks. You just don't roll it from 1, 2, 3, 4 slowly. And then you get to another 8 stack pull, and you're like, okay, here's the affix again. I'll be prepared for it. But you had a nice break in between.
Maybe it just takes time, because it's hard to reach this like intermediate where we like actually know what the important elements of Mythic Plus are. Because as weird as it sounds, moving from Legion to this expansion, people were like super shit on Legion dungeons because they were getting one shot by stuff. So they largely removed the unavoidable one shots. I mean, they're coming back, but like largely they moved the unavoidable one shots and changed how the dungeons worked functionality wise, to where you weren't just like Mongo pulling everything and just like kiting it all around. I mean, those were main issues of Legion dungeons that they addressed. They just addressed them in not great ways. It just takes time, I think, to be able to come up with a comprehensive system that is okay. And especially since Blizzard moves very slowly.
Yeah, especially in Mythic Plus, right? Mythic Plus
get there eventually.
Mythic Plus is basically no change zone, right? Like Mythic Plus is very likely to be the same in any given 6-month period.
Hot fix quaking. Hot fix it. It doesn't need to come with a patch.
It's too late, man. This is like the last Quaking Week pre-patch. It's over now. The window is closed.
That's true.
Hot fix Sky Captain Crag. Hot fix Eudora. Please, just add them in fucking hot fixes. Why do they need to be patches?
Yeah.
Anyways,
that's
my tirade.
Yeah. So going forward into Shadowlands, which is also coming out next year, I am hopeful for Mythic Plus. I think that they've learned a lot of good things. I think they've, the pendulum has swung pretty far from Legion in a lot of places, and I think maybe now in Shadowlands we can bring it back into a healthy mid-ground between Legion keys and BFA keys. A place where you don't need triple range, you don't need triple melee, but you can play any mix, perhaps. Would be really cool.
That'd be nice.
That'd be nice. I'd like to play with my friends.
I think fast updates on Mythic Plus balance would be really, really welcome. Even if they just like started doing the thing where they just nerfed, like aura nerfed specs only in keys, like as a hot fix temporarily, I'd be happy to see something like that coming in. Just like aura, if you can't figure out how to nerf Resto Druid in keys but not in raid, just aura nerf him in M plus and not in raid. And
as long as they're not changing the functionality, I'm more or less okay with that. Just because if you're changing the functionality of how stuff works, like don't do that. Talents, I see honor talents added as like a idea for how to make Mythic Plus like feel unique. I don't feel like I want honor talents, and I don't feel like I really want unique balancing for Mythic Plus all that much, because it makes the game just too complicated.
Does anybody even want honor talents in PvP? Is that something that people like? I don't PvP very hard, so I mostly, to me, it's just a really annoying extra layer on PvP that like stuff working differently there than in raid.
I personally
would,
like that. I would like it for Mythic Plus, but in a very limited fashion, like just a simple change your kick cooldown or give yourself like a movement utility, like for ranged. Like maybe just like 2 talent choices like that for Mythic Plus would be nice.
Yeah, I could see fixing things like the ranged kick issue with that kind of thing maybe working, but I don't know. What if you just give them like a regular talent row where it's against something that's really good in PvP or whatever, and then they can reduce their kick that way, but they can't do it in PvP where it would be a problem. Like maybe you reduce the kick but remove the lockout on it completely or something. I don't know.
Something that I forgot to add to our show notes. How do you feel like essences will be viewed in maybe not the next year, but like down the line? Because legendaries are viewed favorably, and that is such just a confusing thing to me. Because legendaries were trash for 90% of Legion, like literally all the way up until Antorus. Legendaries were bad.
There is still time for them to fix essences. If essences are account wide or big account based catch up, once you have it on a main, by the time patch 8.3 hits, essences can be remembered favorably. If that is not true, essences will go down as one of the most hated systems of all time, I'd say.
Because my thing about legendaries was I don't feel like I really grinded them because I got into the hardcore part of the game late in Legion, like the last 2 patches of Legion, where I didn't really play to the extent of where I didn't have my good legendaries in the first 2 patches, and I couldn't get them in any way possible. So I didn't really feel like I had to grind for them when I actually did play the game a lot. And they kind of came naturally, and I just liked it, and they were just cool effects. But now I feel like I have to go way out of my way to grind for the essences. Like I did PvP islands last night for like 3 hours just to get some of my alts done. Waiting in queue, by the way, for almost that entire time.
Man, you could have pinged both of us, and we would probably come and help you.
I was a pre-made. It was morning shift tonight, and we did it for several hours because we were just sat there in queue because nobody does PvP islands, man. Nobody wants to do that. But that's part of the requirement.
They were fast queues during BG bonus week because I think everybody was getting their blood back then. That's the strat. You need the good blood week so that people are reminded that they have to do a PvP island for that stupid essence.
Yeah, I mean, but it's just things like that where you just spend several hours doing nothing and then doing something you don't want to do to try to get something that minorly increases your damage or survivability in the content that you do want to do. I think that's not the right thing for Blizzard to do.
Yeah, and next patch is going to be, it's going to be so awful, like rolling up a new character next patch and just looking at like a bigger list of essences, including stuff from old content that you have to get to be complete on that character and to have what you need.
Life Force.
Well, that's getting a big nerf.
By the way.
Condensed Life Force getting a big nerf, so we probably aren't going to need that.
Imagine if you needed it, though.
Yeah, if you did, it would be awful. And Vitality Conduit is getting a buff, and that's a Eternal Palace piece, so... yeah. I don't know, it's a spooky time. Spooky time. I think it's still not too late. It's still not too late, though. They can still fix this. They could fix it with probably 5 minutes of writing code for, granting account-wide speed up on this stupid thing. Just give everybody the cheaper prices if they have the thing on their main that they already give you for your off specs. Just give us that, and we are largely there. We're a lot of the way there.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
And speed up blood of the enemy and some of the other ones.
No Dynamo and shit is still the ones that are gated behind rep, even if you give them the reduced cost, it doesn't really affect anything because it's gated behind like fucking 3 weeks worth of rep.
Well, they're down to Revered, but yeah, Revered's still pretty high. I don't know. I mean, if they just hit every essence with a half time gate reduction, I think we'd be close on alts. And it doesn't need to be on mains. That's the thing, is they're doing these changes affecting all characters, and that's making them squeamish about nerfing it too much. Just only nerf it for alts. It's fine. Like the main grind is fine. Nobody complained about the essence grind on mains. That was fine. The problem is just that like we're just looking at our character select screens and we feel like we can't play anything that doesn't have the essences already done. Like if we choose to start rolling up a new character, we're committing to this grind for 6 weeks of doing all these different essences if we want to be able to play them in the same kind of content that we usually play our alts in. And part of the problem as well right now is that like we just have to do it now because it's going to continue for the rest of the expansion. Like the essences are still going to be the same ones in next patch, and that's rare, right? Usually systems like that don't, like gear, right? We don't care about getting 455 Titanforges on our alts because next patch the gear is going to be better, and so we don't need to grind that now. But this is like slots where they're going to just stay for the whole expansion.
Yeah.
But it's not too late.
I will not miss essences.
It's not too late.
Do you think they'll be looked back fondly though?
No, I think they'll be
just the effects.
Legendaries don't look back fondly though. It's
yeah, but legendary, they fixed legendaries in 7.2.
Fair.
The legendaries were good for
Right.
the last year of Legion, whereas essences are going to be good. If they fix essences, to me it looks like 8.3.5 is the likely time that they fix that, like 2 months before a pre-patch or something, and then it's going to be too
Man.
late. It's going to be far too late. Anyways, I that's a pessimistic thing to end on, but I think that a lot of good stuff is happening that is not related to essences. And it's going to be an exciting year, I think, to see what happens in Raid and in Keys and everything. And we'll, of course, continue to be here every week. Next week, again, we are going to do our Titanforge Trivia game show with our friend Squishy as the moderator, as the host. By the time you hear this, the submissions will, of course, be closed for your participation, but there was participation from people, so that's going to be cool. And we'll see how that all pans out next week. I'm really looking forward to that show.
I think we had like 20 patrons and over 100 non-patrons do their submissions. So
yeah, it's going to be really
you guys
cool.
rock.
Yeah. Here, closing out the year for us, I'm going to just show a picture of us making a triangle in person at BlizzCon. If you guys haven't seen this, we did succeed. We did make a triangle in person. It was a lot easier than trying to do it with our webcams. So for those,
Also, we are actual people. We're not robots. This is us in person.
it was weird, man.
I don't leave my house very often.
Yeah. But for those of you that have stuck around after we finished streaming and have seen us trying to make a triangle, here's some evidence that we can do it in easy mode at least. All right, that's going to be
a good
all.
time.
That is going to be all for us this week and this year for regular shows. We'll be back next week with our game show, and then we'll be back January 4th with our returning to the regular cadence of the podcast. Thanks everybody for watching. Bye.
See you next year.
Beta.